We're now in the 9th video of this tutorial series, building a basic helicopter in Blender. Since the last video, I've gone into the game engine and done a little looking around to see what kind of problems I might encounter, and I discovered a pretty major one. And what the problem was looking into the window while the helicopter was in play mode was revealing the fact that the inside of the body of the helicopter is actually transparent. Because I added transparency to the glass, it lets me look right into the helicopter. So what I've come up with to correct that is duplicated this section of the helicopter, closed up some ends, did a little cleanup job on the vertices to lower the count on that. The area of where the skids attached to, there's a little need for cleaning up as well. I took off the engine housing and more or less just created a inner wall for a cockpit. This would be a perfect opportunity to take and build a cockpit if one was in the mind to do that, and the cockpit and the pilot could just simply be built into here. Well, sort of simply. And I'll just try to show what the problem was with this part if I can. And we're going to rotate it around. After I was done preparing the part, I selected the whole thing, gave it a color, and then flipped its normals. And to flip its normals, I went into Mesh, Normals, and Flip. And what flipping its normals did was more or less turn the part inside out. And if we look at the part now from the outside, you can see this transparency is apparent. Now, I need to be in textured mode to actually be able to see that. But it's pretty clear that this part is transparent from the outside and opaque from the inside. So that's exactly the reason why I needed to flip the normals. Now I'm going to place that back into the helicopter. So I'll just grab that up and move it back into the helicopter. I'm going to resize it to 98%, so I'll use S.98. That will shrink it so that it's slightly smaller than the helicopter is and will rest clearly on the inside. And I don't know if this is really necessary, but I'm going to tag it in there with a few vertices. It's likely as not that isn't necessary, but I'm not really sure on that. So that being done, we're ready to go on to the next problem that I found in the game engine. Of course, there's going to be issues to run into, and being able to solve them is a good idea. Okay, we're going to firstly parent our objects. We have 3 objects right now: a propeller, which needs to be parented to the body. So I'll select the 2 starting with the propeller, use Control P and make parent. And repeat the same process for the tail rotor. Make parent. Okay. So now we'll go into the game engine, the purple Pac-Man. Select just the helicopter And we're going to give the helicopter some physical attributes for the game engine. We're going to call it a rigid body. And then we're going to set some bounds for the helicopter as well. In the bounds, there's categories like box, sphere, cylinder, cone. And these are going to determine what the helicopter acts like. Now, we want it to act like a box, because that way it won't roll around when we try to land it. And then I'll press the compound button, and I believe that adds these attributes to all of the children objects, the propeller and the rotor. So I'll deselect that, we'll zoom in a bit, and I'm going to go back into solid mode. Oh, I am in solid mode. Well, in that case, I'm going to go back into edit mode and fix the color of my ground. I think we'd rather have a little bit of a green ground going on here. That being done, we're now just going to try the game engine and see what happens. And lo and behold, our helicopter falls directly into the ground. What's happened there is the skids have sunk right into the ground, and I think this problem may have been caused by moving the object data or just extending the skids too far away from the object data. And what I'm going to do to correct that is just remove the skids from the object entirely. In the game dialog, though, there is an option to set the radius of this, and I've seen that used to change the height that this would sit, but I'd rather just leave that radius as it is and remove the skids from the object. So I'm going to go and check my time and see how much time I have left before I try to do that, see how fast I have to work. So I'll be back in just a sec. As usual, time is a precious commodity, so I'm going to get right on this job. What I need to do is separate the helicopter skid from the helicopter's body and make it into a separate item or object. So I'll use box select to select just the helicopter skids. Have a quick look around to see that I have the whole skid selected. Then I'll use Shift S for the snap dialog and send the cursor to the selection. This will center the cursor on that selection. I'll then press P to call up the separate dialog and separate selected. Tab into object mode and select the skid. As you can see, the object data for the skid is still way up in the helicopter, and that might not work for us. So we're going to center that object data on the skid. I'll go into Object, Transform, and OB Data to Center is the option that I'll choose there. As you can see, the skid snaps up to its object data and is now centered on its object data dot. And this is the reason why we placed the cursor in the first place. I'll use Shift S and send selection to cursor. This will restore the location of the skids and center it on the cursor. With that done, I can just parent the skids to the object and return to the game engine. We'll have a look at what this does now. My part looks pretty hideous in game mode. That's because I don't have any lights, and it just puts up its own crazy lighting when you don't have any lights. So I'll go play, and now the skids land onto the ground, which is what we want. And this process in the long run may come in handy. It may come in handy to have the skid as a separate object, so it's not really any big deal.